have a special event tonight, so we won't have any minutes or citizen comments for tonight's agenda. So I will turn it over to Lori Anderson and let her take it away from here.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Chair Orenshaw and members of the Planning Commission. Tonight, you're going to hear a presentation from Joe Minicozzi, AICP and Principal with Urban 3, which is his firm based in North Carolina. As an aside, we'll have to give Joe a special thank you for what is a late evening presentation for him. Mr. Minicozzi is an urban planner who explains how land use and zoning affect a city's economic health. At past meetings, the Planning Commission has asked how land use and zoning decisions impact the city's finances, and we hope Mr. Minicozzi's presentation will help answer that question. Mr. Minicozzi's credentials are impressive. He is cross-trained in city planning, both in the public and private sectors, as well as private sector real estate finance, and has developed award-winning analytic tools, which we are excited to have him share with you. He is affiliated with the Strong Towns movement, and in 2017 was recognized as one of the 100 most influential urbanists of all time. Mr. Minicozzi's presentation will last about 45 minutes, and then as Chair Orenshaw mentioned, there will be time for Planning Commissioner questions. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Joe Minicozzi, and we'll turn the evening over to him.
Thanks,
we hope
Lori.
you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you. And thanks for, so y'all can see my screen?
Yep.
I do say the word y'all a lot. I'm not a native North Carolinian. It's just a very efficient word, and I've kind of grown to absorb it, even though I'm from upstate New York. But when I talk to communities about city development or where you are or where you're growing, I know that you're going into a comp plan process. One of the ways that I make it relatable is think of yourself growing, or the way that I think of my DNA. So I'm genetically Italian. You can see that from my name. I'll wave my hands around as I'm talking. I can't stop. And this is how I started my life when I was 3 months old and I had hair. And this is my trajectory. I'm going to be my grandfather, whether I like it or not. Or more importantly, I'm going to be, again, when I had hair, I'm going to be this guy. Now, we have a couple of issues in my family. We're all Italian, so we eat a lot of really bad food for us. But I also suffer from a genetic predisposition to heart disease. That's just part of our family. My dad had a 7 bypass heart surgery. I don't know what you call that, a septuple. It's something, right? But cities all have this. You have paths in you. You have a DNA in you, and you have a choice to make. And you also have to wrestle with these decisions. It's, I'd like to eat pizza every day. It would be super awesome. I would like to not work out and not go mountain biking. But I do that stuff to keep myself in balance and also reduce my stress level and get exercise. So think of, as you think of your community going forward, Kenmore's future, who's had your heart attack? Who's had your promise? Who's had the wealth building that you want to have for your community, and to solve some of the community's problems? So we looked at, in Asheville, we look at Atlanta and Charlotte, and we're just like, all right, we don't want what they're doing and have their heart attacks. So we choose the different paths. So I currently live in Asheville right now. I don't know if y'all have ever been to Asheville. It's 4 hours up the highway from Atlanta. It's up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, beautiful setting, bluegrass music. We're 90,000 people. We have 40 breweries, 40. That's like 2,500 people per brewery. We drink a lot. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little place. But we didn't start this way. This is Asheville in the 1970s. There's a longer story here, but Asheville was the second largest city in North Carolina before the Depression, and then it just mothballed for 50 years. These are shots of Asheville from not too long ago. That's a 1996 Chevy Celebrity right there. So that's not too past of our distance in our history. But our community just had this attitude that we're not urban. This isn't who we are. We're not Seattle or Boston or San Francisco. These are just relics. I had the great good fortune of working for this guy, Julian Price, who actually had spent time in the Pacific Northwest, and he was originally from Greensboro, and he stopped in Asheville with his inheritance, and he put basically $15 million into a company called Public Interest Projects. This is their office. I'm still in it. And we did cooperative investment or like a revolving fund. 75% of the money went into fixing buildings and 25% of the money went into seeding businesses. So we started the first vegetarian restaurant, a nightclub, but it was all about making housing downtown and giving people options. So this is one of our buildings before and after. Banks wouldn't finance this. The banks would said no one will ever live in a downtown environment. These are 400 square foot apartments. Who would want that? Well, apparently there's a market for it because this has been 99% leased up ever since. What we found in our conversation and talking to our citizenry is that people had biases in the way that they look at cities. People had biases in the way that they think about economics and the way they think about city planning. But for us, it's about bringing information forward. It's like we can talk about everything we want, but you have to bring data forward to explain what's going on. So to think about when you talk to a farmer, farmers are always talking about land in productivity terms. So what's a crop yield per acre, the water per acre, labor per acre, all that. So let's do the same with buildings. So this is one of the buildings we rehab. We put in ground floor retail, second floor office, and upper story residential. The city did a streetscape project. So thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and the street tree. That's pretty awesome. We took this from $300,000 to $11 million worth of value. You gave us this. Now, it's not really a subsidy because the whole world can walk on it, but let's call it a subsidy. But we grew the taxes by 3,500% on the property. So go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. Go out and buy 3,500% more bike racks. This is growing our community's wealth. We want our community to get healthy financially. But the response we would get from people, again, is the biases. They're just like, well, Joe, that's $11 million. We have this Walmart that's $20 million. Okay, fair enough. That Walmart's double the value. But it took 34 acres of my farm, my community, to make that happen. Our building's on 0.2 acres. So that's consumed a lot of real estate and given us double the value, or per acre. We're 100 times more productive than they are, right? Retail taxes, that matters. We're double the retail taxes they are. Who would thought that a furniture store, a tattoo shop, and a beauty salon is double the retail tax productivity of a Walmart? It is. Have you ever run the math on it? We've also got more residential and we have more jobs. So when you look at the data explains exactly what's happening. It's just understand the economics of what's happening. I was presenting this, the first time I presented this in Colorado, I was like, let me make it easy for you people in Colorado. If you're going to grow something, what are you going to grow? Wheat or marijuana? You're going to grow the pot. It's a cash crop. That's how you make your wealth, right? So just think that way about buildings. I want you to realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. It's 5th grade math. Keep it simple and understand what's happening. And we already talked this way about cars, right? If we talked about cars, could you imagine if I said my Ford F-150 gets 650 miles per tank? You'd laugh me out of the room and you'd say, Joe, that's silly. All the tanks are different sizes. We don't judge cars on miles per tank. We judge it on miles per gallon. And oh, look at that. The numbers just changed. And we should all be driving BMW Asettas. 1955 technology is more efficient than a Prius. That's a fact. This is understanding the economics. We understand this for the economics of gasoline for a $2 to $3 commodity. Certainly you should understand that for a $30,000 to $40,000 commodity. You can't make another Kenmore. That's all the land that you have. So I presented 2009 in Seattle at the National Smart Growth Conference, and I stood in front of the audience with this quote from Mark Twain above my head. And I stood there in the room with my hand in the air. And I said, okay, so who in this room, we're all planners, we want greenways, affordable housing, all of this stuff. Who in this room has read your local tax policies to understand how your tax system works? Not a single hand went up. Like, you all are on the planning commission. You're handling the economics of the city. What does your tax system do? If we don't choose to read this stuff, we're functionally illiterate on how it all operates. And it's not really our fault. No one ever explains it to us. And we certainly don't go hang out in assessors conferences. I do, but not a lot of people do. So why do taxes matter? Well, taxes pay for stuff. So we had to show people, this is the value of our downtown. So you all saw all those boarded up buildings. We didn't get a new building in downtown Asheville until 2008. Now, to show you that it's not all love and roses in Asheville, it was a fight. The city started doing the sidewalks. They started building the public realm. We started doing development. And this guy, he's actually one of my friends, this guy, Chris Peterson. These are some of his campaign ads from the 1990s where he's complaining about the city's municipal investment in downtown. $26 million for downtown garages and streetscape projects. $26 million, that's a lot of money. I love this one here. Downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water, sewer, streets for our citizens. Okay, fine, whatever, Chris. But let's do some math. You $26 million. If you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset and it grows to 550, is investing 26 and yielding a 430 return on investment, is that a good return? Yeah. Why do we listen to Chris? Why aren't we putting information out there to just basically, he raised the question, let's show him whether or not there's a reality here. And by the way, you're not going to stop Chris. He's got a web page with firestone, with brimstone and fire, like the mayor's getting hit with a lightning bolt. By the way, he misspelled charlatans. But I asked the mayor, I said, is that a liquor drink? She goes, it should be. What I've seen with communities is we've lost the ability to have a civic conversation about this stuff. We see this at a federal level, but it's trickled into our communities. This is a kid's book that I picked up in a garage sale in Florida. It's the city, the town, and the country. This is the teacher's guide. You see the T on the spine. Here it is. It's a 3rd grade textbook. So in kindergarten, you learn about your house. 1st grade, the school. 2nd grade, your neighborhood. 3rd grade, you learn about regional planning. Did y'all do that? This is a 1959 textbook on this stuff. In the first half of the book is the teacher's guide. It tells you how to deal with your 3rd graders. And it has this. While patterns vary from state to state, counties are responsible for libraries, health, welfare, etc. In studying the functions performed by your county, you will no doubt find there's a duplication of services and overlapping jurisdictions and a lack of coordination between the county and the communities within it. So y'all are county taxpayers. Are they helping you build up your downtown? Are they involved with building a dog park or anything downtown? You're building them wealth. They should work with you. But it's on us to have that conversation. We've lost the civic understanding. This is one of the lessons in it. It's painfully white. It's also misogynistic. The girls are shoved out in the hallway for some reason. But you read about this, the factory gets built. There's even more kids that go to school. So in blue right here, this is what you ask your 3rd graders. You have 4 good reasons for building a new school. What do your 3rd graders talk about? Well, everybody should have a desk. Maybe everybody should be in the same classroom together. Or how about we split the classroom together? That's called infrastructure inequity, right? Everybody should be treated fairly. On the right-hand side, you read about Mr. Canfield, who lived next door to the Allens. He said he didn't want to build a new school. Our taxes are too high now. If we build a new school, we'll need more teachers. We'll have to pay still higher taxes. That is indeed true. When you buy stuff, it costs money. So you ask your 3rd graders, why would some people have to pay higher taxes and why are some people against paying higher taxes? Like, why can't we have this conversation anymore? Like, y'all have what percent of your city is dedicated to parks? You have to pay for that stuff. That's expensive. And I'm not saying parks are bad. Just make sure that people are aware of the cost of all of that stuff. There are trade-offs. And really what it comes down to is this one statement here, that remember too that many children, whether urban and rural and regardless of region, are tragically limited in their knowledge of their world, and their world's largely the space in which they live and operate. You all understand this. You may be at a cocktail party or something, and you hear from people how somehow you're going to solve all the problems of a city and at a planning commission. And it's because they don't have a parking space on Main Street or whatever. They don't understand the complications of what's happening in the city. And what I would argue is that city, this is my city, is a finite boundary of land that needs to be managed. It's the only so many acres that you have. And if you step out of it really kind of clinically, it's just a really big real estate development project. And in fact, the law says so. This is, if you look at Oxford American Dictionary and look up the word incorporate, it says to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. By law, cities are incorporated. They're corporations. Your county's incorporated, your state's incorporated, and so is our country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show in 2016. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. I'm such a nerd, I went and looked it up at midnight, and there's the code right there on the bottom of the slide that lists us as a federal corporation. It doesn't say we're capitalistic. We're a social corporation. We're essentially all in it together, and it has to cash flow. So my city of Asheville is worth $14 billion, which is 6 times the value of Ted Turner. So does Ted Turner make all of his decisions on CNN based on what's going on Facebook or who's upset about something? Of course not. He's going to take that feedback, but he's got to look at the data of what's happening. So we've done this all across the country. And when you mash up the data, here's what you see. For every $1 of county taxes, somebody out in the unincorporated county is paying to the county. Their brother or sister in the same county that's in the city is paying 5 times that to the same county. Here's the Walmart, here's the mall. That's a 2-story building. This is a 3-story building. That's a 6-story building. So we're not talking skyscrapers. But what's kind of insane is that you stack stories, notice how it jumps up exponentially. It's not a proportional growth. And some people are just, the way that they react to this graphic is kind of funny. I used to get people all the time like, you just hate Walmart. What's your problem? And that's the wrong takeaway. In fact, I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers conference. I don't know if you all hang out with assessors, but if you could imagine 3,000 of them, it makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man. It was like the squarest thing ever. And, this guy gets up and did the keynote talk on Walmarts and how cheap the buildings are. I'm in the back of the room drinking my coffee thinking, this is brilliant. This guy's getting all of his property taxes lowered in one meeting. That's efficient. Think about it. If it's a cheap building, there's no extra value there. The assessors are like, thanks, we're going to make this cheap. Now, I went up to the microphone during Q&A and I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he really honestly shot back 15 years, maybe 20 years. We designed the building to depreciate as much as possible. We'll build another building and depreciate it down again. The buildings are throwaway for us. That's it. From the mouth of babes, the average Walmart consumes more in property taxes than it pays, or more in police services than it pays in property taxes. But just go into it knowing these decisions you make have a lifetime. They have an investment return to your community. And if that's a good deal for you for a 15-year commitment for your corporation, great. That's the life cycle of a cat. At least more than the passing of a cat. Sorry, I'm a dog person. But I'm just making a joke here. I'm just trying to show you that these are commitments to your community, and some businesses don't make long-term commitments to you all. And if it's good for you, great. If it's bad for you, don't do it. And what blows my mind is that people don't see it. So what we do is we try to focus on visualizing the information, and it's amazing where technology has gone. So I can show you a snapshot inside your brain and show you your creative thought process in green versus your brainstem activity in blue, right? The magic of technology. Can I do an economic MRI of your community? So what we do is we focus on visualizing that stuff. So back to Asheville, here's my county. So it's 350 square miles. In gray, I have parks. So we have 2 of the biggest mountains east of the Mississippi, actually the 2 biggest mountains east of the Mississippi, in Mount Mitchell and Mount Pisgah state parks. So they're non-taxable. So just to be crude about it, they don't pay me taxes. I don't care. I've got green and low value. I've got purple and high value. So this is all low value stuff up here. This big purple splotch right there is the Biltmore estate. That's America's largest house. That's worth $100 million. Sounds impressive. But remember, it's a 180,000 square foot house sitting on 8,000 acres of land. That's miles per tank. Rather than look at it this way, let's say value per acre, and the map just changed. And let me just show it to you in 3D. Can you all tell me where downtown is? It's that big purple mountain just shooting off the map. So when I talk to folks out in the county, there's people that I know that live out in Fairview, and they're thinking they're paying a lot of taxes because they know people out in Hickory Nut Gap. I'm like, well, that's great, but what are we contributing to the county? So they actually got our state legislature to call us a cesspool of sin. And I was on the Downtown Association board, and we're like, really? How about a thank you card? But also look out at Black Mountain, and you can see its little downtown popping up. Black Mountain's a community of about 9,000 people, and you can see its little main street popping up right there. The physical form shows you how to make productivity. So, you have to show people this and don't just talk about it. And sometimes people push back and like, well, that's fine. That's North Carolina. We're different. Our state's different. It's like, no, you're not. This is Kansas City, Kansas. Guess where downtown is? This is actually a streetcar suburb of Country Club Plaza. You can see it's functioning just like a downtown down south. This is Manchester, New Hampshire, Bozeman, Montana. Do y'all see a pattern? Brevard, North Carolina. This is 8,000 people. And look at its little downtown. So in Washington, your state runs, your communities run a lot off retail. So what about retail? So this is Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is their property tax model. You can see where downtown Minneapolis is. This is all of Hennepin County. And we're doing, Minnesotans are awesome. They have incredible data. This is their retail tax data. They also have Mall of America, which is the biggest retail environment. And when Josh was, my head analyst, Josh McCarty, was doing this, I said, Josh, where's downtown? He's like, oh, it's up over here. So this is downtown Minneapolis's retail productivity compared to Mall of America. Who would have thought that downtown is 10 times the productivity of Mall of America, which is a monolithically retail environment that's the biggest mall on the planet and on the country. So we have to go through this stuff, ask questions, look at the data, and realize that this is all geospatial. I know this joke doesn't work for people under the age of 35, but I can't resist using this joke. It's spatial analysis. And also not all retail is the same. This is a fun model in Durango, Colorado. This is their property tax model. The counties in Colorado get all of the property taxes, or then they did, and the cities get all the retail taxes. So the county should be all over helping downtown out. And then South Durango is where the mall, the Home Depot, the Walmart's all down here. This is the retail model. So downtown's still winning. This is total productivity. This is jobs. And we had a couple of businesses that opened their books and gave them to us and said, we want an apples to apples comparison of us versus Walmart. So Tim Wheeler owns the coffee shop, Durango Coffee Shop. And Tim's interesting. They're both a little bit freaky. Tim like sells all of this kitchen equipment in this coffee shop. They're entrepreneurs. They just make money doing weird stuff. Peter has a bookstore, phenomenal bookstore, but he likes talking about honey. But they gave us their books. Here's the retail of Main Street versus Walmart. Here's the county property taxes paid for those two businesses on Main Street versus the Walmart. Who would have thought that those buildings was that 15 times the productivity of a Walmart property taxes and five times the retail tax production? You know, again, these are their numbers. And then jobs. So I asked the community, I said, let's just think this through for a second. This is one level of economics. Let's ask the next level of economics. Which side of this ledger is the retail employee being paid more per hour, on the blue side or the gray side? Probably the blue side. It might be a nickel or a dime more, but small businesses pay their employees more than national chains. Now let's ask the next level of economic analysis. Who's hiring the local website designer, the local attorney, the local accountant? Is it the blue side or the gray side? It's the blue side. Now, who's involved on the planning commission? Who's volunteering for building a bike trail? Who's helping the community? Is it the blue side or the gray side? If we aren't looking at these consciously and weighing these decisions in our community, we actually tear our community apart, both financially and it is a social fabric. So be aware of that. The other thing is with the data, we looked at them through the recession. The red layer is downtown, the blue layer at the bottom is South Durango, the strip. And downtown before the recession was 86% of the strip malls, or the mall area's production in retail taxes. After the recession, downtown actually caught up to about 91%. So through the recession, downtown picked up. And so we figured, well, let's be agnostic about it. Maybe downtown's building more square footage, but it blew our mind when we saw how little downtown grew compared to South Durango. So pound for pound, dollar for dollar, downtown only added 17,000 square feet. Meanwhile, South Durango was adding 300,000 square feet of retail, and downtown was still catching up. So we have to understand the math here. We have to understand what's going on in our community, that this free market stuff that's happening on the left, it ain't free market. It's basically following an economic model of taking local wealth and converting it out of your community. And you're basically making an exchange. It's not a conscious exchange, but when you don't have money for the greenway, the art teacher, or the dancing traffic cop, it's not that you don't have that money. You've just made an exchange invisibly through how you've approved plans in your city. Sometimes people say to me, like, you just want to have big buildings everywhere. And I'm like, no, again, you're missing the point. Understand the game that's being played here. Don't hate the player, hate the game. This is Charleston, South Carolina. This is one of the oldest communities in the South. It's like a southern Boston. Here's their community. And I was joking with them. I'm like, look, y'all, you didn't make the ocean. God made that. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. This is what man made. So this is the wealth that you created. Now you're a really super old place. They're actually older than the United States. So the country has a birth date. We used the birth date and just only looked at buildings that are older than the United States. Buildings like this is the Red Dot Liquor Store, which was built in 1686. It's the oldest continuously operating liquor store in the entire country, but for 20 years, it was called something else, but it still sold liquor. But anyway, this is all the old buildings. Here they are in plan. So 21 acres of buildings that predate the United States. This is the check that they wrote to the county and county property taxes in 2015. So that's the county property taxes, $600. They paid city taxes and a downtown improvement district tax on top of that. This is what the county got. Out in the county, there's a Walmart, and sure enough, it was about the same acreage as all the colonial buildings. This is what they paid the same year. Now, remember what I told you, that Walmart's going to be gone by 2025, 2030. And it's paying like 1/13 the taxes. Look at your rules and ask yourself, is it possible or even legal to build that colonial building in your community? I often find people with like minimum lot sizes. I'm like, why do you have that? What's up with that? This is the skinny house in Boston. This thing's 10 feet wide. It's worth $62 million an acre in value. Now, I wouldn't live in it, at least not now. Somebody bought it because those are the pictures I took from Zillow off the inside. This is a really cool building. This is 7 feet wide. I love that it's skinnier than a smart car. That's small. This was built as a dollhouse for the house that's to the right of it. And when the girls grew up, one of them moved in next door and lived in it. The whole property is 356 square feet. Why not? I mean, this is cheap, but per acre, it's really potent. And you see this all in these old cities. That's like this pattern that we've had. 700 square feet. Look, the building on the right's 819 square feet. It's $67 million of value per acre. Even mixed use buildings. This is a little triangular 600 square foot mixed use building with a retail ground floor with offices above it. Small spaces make wealth. They produce opportunities for entrepreneurs because they're actually really cheap to get into because they're less square footage, but they can be potent. Even this is an ADU. This is like a garage apartment in Rancho Cucamonga, California. And it doesn't even look like an apartment, but it is. Somebody's living in it. And this thing's pulling $13.7 million of value per acre. Now, if you just focus on its individualized tax bill, you don't understand the productivity. You have to make it apples to apples to understand it. Worse is when you have communities like we have plenty of money. We don't have to worry about revenues. If you're not looking at the revenues, you should be looking at the costs. So this is Lancaster, California, up and over the mountain from Los Angeles. They're not in good shape financially, but they're really creative people. And they know they need to start changing their ways. So this is their downtown. There are 166,000 people. They have like one building that's like 3 stories tall downtown. Can you spot it in the model? It's like the one thing that's popping up. They should have a much more robust downtown. But the thing that blew my mind, check this out. They have 953 miles of roads. You might wonder, what does that look like? So we went ahead and put it on a map. So they have to build a road every 50 years from Los Angeles to Portland. That's how much roads they carry. One of the things that's kind of a little bit scary is how the municipalities, just out of habit of how we run finance, communities, and talk to your finance officer. Your finance officer will show you your ledger sheet where your roads and pipes are assets of your community. When we talk to finance officers, the first question I ask them is, I'm like, look, I've got my computer's an asset. If I had delivery vehicles, those are assets. If I had real estate, like a hot dog stand, those are assets. I can sell you my building, my truck, or my computer. Can you pick your roads up and can you sell them to Bothell? No, you're stuck with them. So that's an asset that you have to manage. It's not an asset that has wealth. So in real estate, when you own an asset, like this mall, let's say, I know that I have air conditioners that are on this mall and that they have to be replaced because they have a life cycle. So every so often, I've got to drop $85,000 a pop per unit, and I have to get an air crane with a crew of $35,000 to get out there and do the deal. So every 15 to 20 years, I have to squirrel away about $205,000. That's the reality of owning an asset. So when a developer hands you infrastructure, even though they pay impact fees or whatever, you have taken on a long-term permanent obligation to keep rebuilding that stuff. So this is what their 500 miles or their roads look like, and when they were built. So you can see their great-grandparents had a whole bunch of roads in the early 1900s. Everybody went to sleep. After World War II, you can't help but notice this one core of lane miles that they built in 1953. Well, guess what? When that gets built, the first rebuild happens 50 years later. So when the community was hit with that huge capital expense, what did they do to get money to pay for all of that road rebuilding? You're either going to get a bond, but most communities, what they do is they let out more development, they annex more land, which means they take more roads in with it. So this comes back with the second rebuild, and it brings along with it the new stuff. So we stopped them in 2016 and said, you're not building another road from here to infinity. Let's see how you cash flow. This is just what you're holding. So basically that first wave, we can look backward and see, well, this looks kind of stupid. And every American city did this. We all just blew our doors out after World War II. And then we doubled down on it because we convinced ourselves, this is who we are. We're a car culture community. Everybody's car culture. It's great. You just bought more roads. And then now it's starting to capitalize on itself and get bigger and bigger. and we're not adding more infrastructure. Notice how we stopped that in 2016. It's capitalizing on itself. And guess what? Asphalt isn't getting cheaper either. So we flushed their money. California has strict requirements about how they fund things, flushing their money into the system. What's green they can afford and what's red is they can't. And we said, you have to just make some tough choices. You can only afford 50% of their roads. Some of them we recommended reverting to dirt, just let them go back to earth and just don't use them anymore. But this is a habit. Every American community has gone through this, and now the pipers come due. We can talk about climate change all day long, but what's going on is our financial model of how cities operate is basically driving us through this Ponzi scheme in the first place. And I understand this is super depressing. I can cheer you up. In Eugene, Oregon, we did their property tax model, and this is floating their whole city in a lake. And what's above the water line is the money coming out of the community. What's below the water line is the cost of the community. So we sent everybody a bill to all of their properties for their roads, sidewalks, pipes, whatever, and just pulled their property bills to see, are you paying enough to cover it? So any corporation, you would do this. You would do a ROI statement to figure out whether you can stay in business. So this is how it looks when you net it out. So what's black in the black is above the water line. What's in the red or negative or subsidized is below the water. So this is the model. And we said your downtown's doing all right. But if you lift this up like you're looking for a salamander under a rock, this is what you see. So you see the spread of subsidy across the whole model. And we're like, this is not sustainable. So to make it simple, we made this Brady Bunch slide of residential, low density, medium density, high density across the top, mixed use, low, medium, high, commercial, low, medium, and high. And this is how it nets out. So single family detached housing, doesn't matter what you're looking at, is basically subsidized. And in their community, it's about $1,400 an acre of subsidy. And the crazy thing is this isn't surprising. Like, we've known this since the 60s. Actually, the Nixon administration in 1973 published this document, The Cost of Sprawl. Like, we know this stuff. This is not rocket science. But the community is going to say, well, Joe, look, I want a house. I'm like, what? That's cool, but not for 80% of your land use. You have to balance this stuff out. I want to eat lobster every day. I can't. I've got to make tough choices. So think of your community like a series of tree rings. This is something called the transect. But thinking of it, these layers that go out, you want to balance the layers. You don't want to have one tree ring that's 80% of your community. You want to work it out a little bit differently. And you have to make tougher choices. So in their community, we said, maybe you should lay off. They were actually considering expanding their growth boundary. And we're like, no, you're like losing way too much money existing in your existing supply. Don't double down on that, but do some stuff in your downtown. But if you look up here on the north side, you can see this thing called Crescent Village. There's like a little node up there that's net positive. We're like, maybe you should try to do maybe 4 of those in the next 5 to 10 years. Just try to get that going to make yourself a little bit more healthy. Anybody that, like, I need to lose 20 pounds. I'm not going to go to Gold's Gym and just start like bench pressing 250 pounds. I'm going to put on some comfortable clothing, go on a bike ride. I'm going to take it easy first and work my way into that dietary change. You have to do that with cities as well, but also understand where the incentives are, that there are incentives that are baked into the system that are currently fueling the suburban bias. And I'll show you one of my favorites. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming. So when you look at property, you've got dirt and you've got a building on that property. The building's where most of your money's coming from, but we can go into the model and just turn the buildings off and just look at the dirt value per acre. So that's what's going on here. And you see this neighborhood in the upper left up here. See how everybody's parcels are blue? That means everybody's dirt's about the same value per acre or the same mile per gallon, right? But look at this one right here. So I was presenting this at 8:30 in the morning in the library in downtown Cheyenne. And I said, hey, what's going on here where this is $15,000 an acre, and when you cross the street, it doubles in value to $30,000? What's up with that? It's the same zoning category. And the tax assessor shot her hand up in the air and she just yells out into the room. She goes, you don't understand. And I'm like, what am I missing? She goes, well, they have more land. There's less people that can afford larger parcels of land. So there's less of a market supply. So therefore we have to offer the discount because it's less value per acre. I'm like, really? Is that true? So I've got 3 miles of road around this property. This fellow over here across the street only has 200 feet of frontage. She goes, yeah, we don't count infrastructure as part of the valuation. The mayor just about spat coffee out of his nose. And I'm like, really? I get a bigger piece of property and I get more infrastructure and you give me a discount? And she's like, well, yeah, that's our standard. I'm like, does that work that way with other commodities? Like if I have a bigger diamond, is it cheaper? And she's like, well, no, but this is different. I'm like, how is it different? Secondly, their magazine is called, I'm not making this up, it's called Fair and Equitable. And I said, how is this fair and how is it equitable? And she just went blank. So this is why I went to the assessors conference. I showed them this exact same show. Now, to their credit, I asked them, how is this fair and how is this equitable? And the response was great. They're like, it's not. I'm like, where'd you get this standard? Did Moses deliver this to you? Like, where'd this come from? They're like, we don't know. You should talk to Larry. So they sent me this guy, Larry Clark. And I said, can you see how this manipulates the market? And he's like, yeah, we probably need to change that one. So just be aware, this is going on in your community. I don't know if you read the New York Times article on Sunday about the valuation of people's real estate and housing. It is just a muck with all sorts of random voodoo inside the assessment system. So understand that, and understand that it's going to affect your real estate. One last example is Indianapolis. We did a transit corridor analysis. So we're focusing on the blue line here, and we're trying to grow that community, or they're trying to grow the community up. We're working with the bus authority, and it was really weird as a client relationship because we had to get the city to kind of understand what their zoning issues were, even though they weren't our client. So we turned the corridor into a thermometer, if you will. There's like 10,000 acres of land of available opportunity. The planners were like, we only have 5% vacant land. And I said, well, that's not the only thing you should be looking at. You should ask the model, where's the dirt worth more than the building on top of it? That's another 11%. So really you have 16% of opportunity. Now the community was all freaked out because they don't want change. They don't want their house to get priced out. They don't want good buildings to get torn down. And so we had to respect that and say, look, we hear you. That's totally valid. But 48% of this area, let's just go ahead and say it's off the table. Just pick the area that you want to keep because it's heritage or whatever, but let's draw that line. More importantly, we should go into this area here where you have like a dead Jiffy Lube or something like that. Let's go and find those buildings somewhere in there. We should all draw a line together of where that opportunity is. Now, if you do the math on this, that's like 4,000 acres of land right here of opportunity to get new wealth in your community, to pay for things like the bus or a dog park or whatever you want. So you have to understand the economics of this. So we did a really simple analysis of here's all of Marion County. These are all their buildings. This is all of the parking in the entire county. So you're looking at 27% of the county is being of land use is parking. Or another way of doing it, this is the county, this is the parking area, this is the building area, this is the roads, and this is everything else, berms, buffers, backyards, whatever. Water's not taxable, so we just put it on the side. When you look at the cash flow, this is the way your revenues work. So that stuff that you love doesn't really pay a whole lot of taxes. Now, what's crazy though, they're holding about $17 billion worth of roads in their community. That's the value of the car moving around, right? When the car stops, it's on parking. Look at the value of parking compared to the value of roads. If they're the same area, 24 square miles, 29 square miles, shouldn't they be about the same value? Yeah, that's a subsidy, right? If you're not charging it the appropriate fee for its infrastructure consumption, that money's coming out of your building fund and it's rating that opportunity to have an art teacher or a greenway. So that's countywide. We went ahead and did the same thing we did a TOD, a transit-oriented cookie cutter down the transit system of a walk distance from the bus stop. And that's what its parking is inside the middle of the city. This is the parking in the bus area. Now you probably don't remember the county, so let me go ahead and bring that back. And I said to them, it's pretty weird that you've got more land dedicated to parking, 36% inside your corridor versus countywide. That's crazy. Now, the reason is because the city's zoning requirement required a whole lot of parking that it was totally unnecessary. So we showed them, like, here's the Indianapolis 500. So inside the bus corridor, you're looking at 3 times the Indianapolis 500 of parking in your bus corridor. So here's the economics of it. This is Marion of Marion County. There she is. Countywide, they have about 1,200 square feet of buildings dedicated to Marion, 800 square feet of parking, and about 1,000 square feet of roads. When this gets built, the assessor puts a price tag on it. So buildings are about $52 a square foot, parking 75 cents a square foot. The road is going to cost you, the taxpayer, $22 a square foot in front of the building and $22 a square foot in front of the parking. So if you just look at this, you'll see the subsidy. parking is paying 71 times less taxes than the building, even though they both have the same infrastructure commitment in front of them. Or another way of looking at it, if we just took half the taxes paid by the building and half the taxes paid by the parking, how long will it take each of them to pay off the street in front of them? It's 42 years for the building. It's 3,000 years for the parking. Now remember what I said, roads last 50 years. So this is an economic situation that we've all built ourselves into, hoping that it works out and no one's done the math on it. Now back to the parking requirements. Who owns cars? So this is the households with no vehicles, no cars in Indianapolis, households with one car, households with two cars, and households with three cars. So we're not talking Seattle or San Francisco here. This is Indianapolis, and they're actually 50% of the county have one car or less per household. When you look at the bus corridor, you're looking at 60%. So if not everyone has a car, why do you require 2 parking spaces per residential unit? And the city was like, oh yeah, we probably should change that. It was amazing. It's like, why aren't people looking at the data to just kind of understand what's going on in your city? And then also realize they've got enough roads to go all the way to Anchorage. They are not going to get their way out of this. Every American city has way overbuilt their road capacity system. So just to close on equity, and this is a story that's coming out now. The New York Times covered it. This is something they did a couple of years ago in South Florida. It's kind of like a joke, but it's not really a joke. I used to work in South Florida. They really love their millionaires and their mansions. These are some mansions, and these are their actual property tax bills. $1 million for this one up here. It's a 58,000 square foot house because you need that. It's got a separate red and white wine tasting rooms. I don't know what they do for a blush. I guess they go out on the lanai or something. This is a mansion with 2 mansions because you need a second mansion for your spouse. You don't want them in the same house as you. You want to send them across the street over here. This is a mansion with a golf course on the ocean because why not? All right. Well, you know me, I'm an apples to apples guy. This is their total bill. What's their per acre? So this is their per acre. So let's rearrange them based on potency. So the smallest one is the most potent. The golf course one's the least potent. And the double mansion is in the middle of the pack at about 230,000 per acre. Okay. Let's go from them. I mean, I don't know if any of y'all are like 1%ers or not, but let's go from the 1%ers down to the rest of us, the multi-dollar mansions, the schlubs like us, and do their math. So this is from middle income Palm Beach County down to communities of low wealth. These are some of the poor old Black neighborhoods in West Palm Beach. She's paying $1,000 of taxes for her house, but that's not fair because her house is the size of a parking space. So per acre, she's actually crushing it at 32,000. Now you probably don't remember the rich people. So let's just go ahead and grab this guy's property at 77,000. He's actually more tax productive than the golf course one. Who would have thought? Now what's crazy is he's in the oldest block in Palm Beach County. It's a place called Mango Promenade. He doesn't even have like a street going through the block. He doesn't have a yard. His jacuzzi's in his parking space, and they have a sidewalk for infrastructure. That's killing it. Okay, let's go to these things. These are townhouses. These are illegal in most cities. $5,000 to $6,000 of taxes, again, per acre. They're crushing it at like $400,000 of taxes per acre, which is way more productive than the double mansion. And again, we need to understand the math of this stuff. Now, I used to stop the show here, but I'm going to get a little edgy here and get and grab some other people. We grabbed Rush Limbaugh's house because we couldn't resist. He has this phenomenal estate on the ocean. But here's his market value, and this is his taxable value. So he has a 49% reduction. This is all perfectly legal. This is the way the tax system operates. He gets a 50% haircut from market value to taxable value. We all get discounts in the tax system. All right, let's take a look at her discount. Does that look remotely fair to you? I show this to people in Florida and they're just like, what? I'm like, do you ever look at the tax system? Now, what's crazy, at $33,000 of taxes per acre, she's more productive than Mar-a-Lago. What's up with that? It's like, do the math on this stuff and understand what's going on. So, maybe you're saying, okay, Joe, this is just crazy Florida. People in Florida are insane. We all know that. So I was having a conversation with a different Laurie Anderson, not this Laurie Anderson. And I said, let me just take a look at some of your property. So here's the bank downtown. We looked at the bank. And then there's this kind of triangular shape of real estate across the highway over here. That's like, I guess, boat sales and car sales, like right near down to your core of your city. I went over to the waterfront and grabbed this really cool, very valuable house right there. I went into one of the neighborhoods. This is a 183rd Street. I grabbed this little house. These are all just random grabs in your community. And then about a block away from that house on this cul-de-sac is this property right here. Oh, I also grabbed a townhouse. And it's cool that you guys have townhouses. I grabbed that one right there. So here they all are. This is the value per acre of the bank, about $2 million of value per acre. 2 blocks away, that car dealership is used car lots, $500,000. And again, it's like you still have all that infrastructure downtown, but look at that discount in tax productivity. When you don't use your real estate, you don't pay taxes on it, which is crazy because you still have all the infrastructure. This is the wealthy house at about $8 million of value per acre. This is that little house, which is about a quarter of the value. Who would have thought that house is a quarter of the value? But check this out. The cul-de-sac house is killing it. It's like way more value than the waterfront. Would you have thought that? It's like almost 3 times. And then the townhouse is crushing it at 32 million an acre. So again, understand this. And people may say, well, I don't want to live in a townhouse. It's like, great, they're not for you. We're not building them for you. There's other people that want them. But also you realize, ask yourself, are you paying your fair share of taxes into the system? You do the math on that. And speaking of math, I did look at your comp plan. I told Lori, I said, just please do not do this to your citizens. Don't just put a table out there, put a graphic. So this is a pie chart of your community. You're using 50%, more than 50% of your community as single family detached. Remember what I told you about the subsidy. And it's great that people want that, but you're going to need to build out those other pie charts. In this quarter right here of schools, greenways, and golf courses, that stuff's not giving you anything in taxes. So you're going to be dependent on this stuff and actually the commercial and the multifamily to carry the freight. And that's the thinnest slices of your pie right now. So you know that, know where your money's being made and kind of understand this and make sure you're running the cash flow on this stuff. Look at your budget. This is your revenue stream for your city. Again, y'all didn't have, you had this kind of spreadsheet. Who's going to look at that? Like make a pie chart. 55% of your budget comes from stuff of how you use land, your sales taxes and your property taxes. So that's the close of my show. We call this geo accounting. And like your accountant, I don't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, but your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. Know where you're leaking your money. Understand where you're losing money in your city, in your revenue bucket. Is it tax policy that's doing it? Is it fee structures? Is it biased thinking? And if you're an assessor, what's going on? Ask those serious questions. And what we'd like to do is put the numbers on the map so you can see it, make those visuals so you can see what's going on in your community and communicate to citizens who are just too busy to understand the nuances of economics. Make it easy for folks to understand this stuff. And I would recommend Chuck's book, The Strong Towns Revolution. Gets into a lot of the stuff I just presented on infrastructure expenses. And this is a brilliant book, a great place to start. And thanks for letting me do some math tonight.
Great. Well, thanks, Joe. A lot of great information there. So any of my colleagues have any questions they'd like to pose to Joe? We have, looks like about a little over 10 minutes we can share with him. So anybody interested in?
I can take as long as you want. I'm here. So.
Oh, okay. Well, we appreciate that. So anybody want to take a shot here? Go ahead, Tracy.
First, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. It was a really wonderfully informative and inspiring presentation, so thank you so much. In Kenmore, we have a lot of very environmentally sensitive land, critical areas that probably should not be developed on. So how does your thinking about urban planning and development take into account that sort of thing?
That's a great question. Let me share something. So first back to Asheville. You know, I think we need to get more non-taxable land in Asheville. I think we need to connect those parks, because that's the only way to control growth, is to remove the ability for it to grow on. So in the case of Eugene, having a growth boundary was critical to their point of self-evaluation. Once they blew out their container, they were in this habit of, well, we just expand the growth boundary again. It's like, no, your diet is wrong. You need to change your diet because you're wasting that real estate opportunity. And there's only one planet. So one of the books I'd recommend, it's called Donut Economics. And check her out. But basically, you're going to be making critical choices about what land is off the table and how do you what is being sacrificed. You've already sacrificed a lot of land in your community that's all surface parking lots, that used car dealership, whatever. That's not a good use. It's not productive is a use of your land. And you've already destroyed, like, asphalt's the last crop you're going to grow on that. So now that you've wasted it, maybe that's the start where a place where you prioritize it. The other lands, you want to think about, what does nature need? So another book is, it's kind of fun. I've never really sat here to do the presentation this way, but this is a book called Design with Nature. This is from 1969. Ian McHarg was the first keynote speaker at the first Earth Week in Philadelphia. And one of the things that he talks about, he's actually the godfather of GIS, this technology that we use. And he's like, the land is a network. The land has a system. And there's a great video I can send you where he's presenting at the Planning Commission in Minneapolis. And he's got a map of the wetland. And it's a map of the rivers, the streams, the brooks, and then also where the wetlands are, which are essentially the sponges that make the water clean. And he's got the map up on the wall. And he's like, Mother Nature has given you a drink. He's Scottish. He's like, Mother Nature has given you a drinking water system. Stay out of it. Do you know how expensive this is to make it yourself? Stay out of it. And this is a map of your sacred trees. Stay out of those. You know how many generations it takes to make these. But take this map and lay them over each other, and Mother Nature will tell you exactly where to build, like stained glass. Do what she is giving to you and stay out of the lands that she needs. And it's such a brilliant concept. So do those GIS maps to understand that, but understand that a lot of places you may have already destroyed those opportunities. So figure out how to do less damage. Now that's one way with this map. Another way is in Minneapolis, we saw this really well. There you go. So this is the model of just the dirt value. So no buildings in this model, and this is showing the dirt. And one of the things, when we always do these CAT scans and we read them and they're like, what's going on? What's this reading to us? And what was weird to me in looking at this model, this is a little village out here at this lake called Wayzata. It's about 13,000 people, and that's downtown Minneapolis right there. And I was showing this to the planner and I was like, how on this planet is dirt in downtown Wayzata pulling the value of downtown Minneapolis? And he's like, huh, that's interesting. And then he flipped out on me. He's like, oh my God, this shows the ordinance of 1983-2216. I mean, he's totally tweaked out on me as a planner nerd. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, it's Minnesota. Minnesota is very socially conscious. Up until 1980, whatever, every lake had to be publicly accessible. That was a rule in Minnesota until the 80s, when all of a sudden the county decided, we don't need to do that anymore. So on the left, you can see what happens when you completely privatize the water body. So only those around the edge of that crust have the value. People immediately on the other side of it, no value for you, no waterfront for you, right? Perfect logic that the rich people all live around the edge. Okay, well, what did you sacrifice in that? Well, let's look over here to this park where you have two lakes under the old rule where they're completely publicly accessible with greenways. There's a big park right here in the middle. So all the neighborhoods around them have more latent wealth because everybody could use those parks. You're actually building more wealth in your community and protecting that amenity at the same time by allowing people to see it, you know, and enjoy it. So that's another opportunity. Again, it depends on how those lands that you're looking at. But yeah, I would take those approaches.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And just to check my thinking, I was thinking as you were talking that taking your approach to thinking about what value can we get out of certain parcels of land could actually help take, if we maximize that, that could help take pressures off other parcels of land that we want to protect.
Yeah. Or you could pay to buy them and put them into the park system. It's like, take them off the market, but you need to have, where do you get that wealth from?
Right.
So, you know, a used car dealership isn't going to be helping you.
Mm-hmm.
So it just at least understand the transactional cost. I like to call it a 2-drink minimum. Our tax system should at least cover the cost of infrastructure that's adjacent to getting that opportunity to the building. Mm-hmm. It should be neutral, you know, and then we should be consciously deciding what we want to subsidize. We want to subsidize a homeless shelter, affordable housing, artist housing, pink flamingos in everybody's yard. I don't care. It's your community. Mm-hmm. But you should be making these choices conscious rather than letting the system pass the subsidy by you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy. Can we go back to the sharing the full screen? I want to make sure others who have a question that they have an opportunity. So, anybody else have a question for Joe at this point?
Was it entertaining?
It was. Hey, Joe, I have maybe one question for you, and that is, one of your slides, you know, really showed the predominantly residential nature of our community, and we do have an evolving downtown that does have. I'm not sure how you're familiar with it, notwithstanding the lot you showed, but we do have quite a bit of multifamily and commercial going in, and a lot of zoning to support that as well in our downtown core. But we're also part of a very large metropolitan area with a lot of competition from other areas. So do you have any thoughts on how a community such as ours can kind of look at identifying competitive advantages so we can bring in the retail and the downtown commercial development that, like I say, has a lot of economic advantages for our community?
I mean, I don't know all of your policies is the thing. We haven't studied your city that deeply.
Sure. Yeah.
But you're going to want to see, basically the first thing is a bit of triage. We always start with the revenue model, like where's the money coming from, and just seeing it in relative terms. A map of surface parking lots, just having a handle on how much of our city is committed to that use. The easiest thing to do is just get rid of your parking requirements. It's kind of unnecessary. A builder, developer, or a property owner is going to make those choices themselves. But even if you do that, you're going to find the banking industry is a laggard, where they're just have these belief systems, and they're not going to fund a developer. You can do things creatively with tax increment or some sort of, like the back to that Walmart example. If you have a property valued based tax system, there's a perverse incentive to build junk in your community, period. Like the incentive is already there to just basically give you a pile of junk. So if the system is already giving you an incentive, or giving somebody an incentive, doing a tax increment or doing some other method to equalize it is one of the biggest quivers that you have in your kit. It's sad that we have to go through that. Now, the other thing is you could do some, I don't know your full state tax policy. In North Carolina, we could actually do the equivalent of Henry George land value taxation. Do you know that one at all? Y'all never heard of Henry George? Okay, I'm going to share the screen again. This one's fun. Henry George is a tax economist from the 1800s. And he came up with this idea of eliminating building is a method of value. And his thinking was like, why should the building matter? if you invest in building a granite building, how are you more expensive than the wood building that's next to you? You know, so if anything, if having a property valued based system is a penalty to doing nice architecture. So he's like, really, the location in the dirt. And secondly, if we don't judge the dirt properly, somebody could just sit on the land and speculate and waste that opportunity for everybody. And his, you know, think about when he was writing this in the 1800s, and you have this flood of immigrants coming from across the ocean into our cities of Philadelphia, Boston, New York, and they're driving up the price of real estate. And just because people had the luck of being there 50 years before everybody else, they could hold all the land and let the value go up and do nothing on the property. Meanwhile, the cost of your city is going through the roof because there's no supply in the marketplace. And he's like, people should pay for that. They should pay for speculating in our community, because we've done our job by putting pipes and roads and sidewalks and all of the infrastructure to their front door. They should at least pay that value back to us, right? Pay your 2-drink minimum. Sorry, you're choosing not to build on the land. You're choosing not to let a builder who wants to be in our community to solve our housing problem or solve our retail problem. You're choosing to take that supply off the marketplace. So pay for it, or at least pay what you owe us. And if you want to sit on it forever, great. We're at least not going to lose money on you. So Elizabeth Maggie Phillips was like, it spurred this huge movement across the country called Georgism. I mean, look it up. It's crazy. It's like they had conferences. Elizabeth Maggie Phillips was a Georgist, and I love her eyebrows, by the way. I think she put them on with a tar brush or something. But she's like, you know what? Adults are too set in their ways. You know, and I see this with audiences when I'm like, why don't you do Georgism? They're like, oh, we can't change the tax system. It's too hard. It's so hard. We can't do that. We'll have to talk to somebody. It's like, seriously? It's your damn community. Get control of it. So she's like, you know what? I'm not even going to bother with adults. Adults are too set in their ways. They're cowards. They can't change their mind. So I'm going to work with kids. So she invented a board game that teaches Georgism. Does it look at all familiar? It was originally called the Landlord's game, and Milton Bradley stole it and turned it into Monopoly. But the rules of the game are quite simple. Location, 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 land assembly, and you put buildings on it. That's how you win the game. So just go back to square one. We learned this as kids. Think about your city the same way.
Great. Thank you. So maybe time for one more question. Anybody else have any questions for Joe? He's been very generous with his time. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Joe. Question for you. One of the trends that we've been thinking through and dealing with, or anticipating, particularly here in Seattle, is the movement from small retail into the Amazon and other sorts of vendors, and how that impacts sales tax revenues. So we've spent a lot of time looking at mixed use retail and residential as a way and increase density in our downtown to be able to increase our sales tax revenue, which is in Kenmore is actually quite scant compared to other cities. Do you see this as an enduring trend, or is there any thinking out there that you're aware of on how that might change your city strategy in their zoning or in their development planning?
You know, I remember at the beginning of COVID, there was this flurry, particularly in my industry, where everybody's like, no one's going to have cities ever again. Cities are gone. And I was like, really? Tell that to people that live in Rome or Paris. How many plagues have they been through? You know, it's like, as hominids, this is what we do. We create these community environments. This is how we operate. You know, it's like, for any meat eaters in the audience, you know, you're generally not killing your own chicken. You're going to buy that from somebody that's already butchered it for you. You know, this is what we learn with our skill sets, is that we work really well together as a species. And cities are how we triumph. There's actually another good book called Triumph of the City by Edward Glaser. I don't know if y'all ever read this, but this is like the economic models of cities. I think what you're going to see is the patterns will change of commerce. Who's going to predict what that is? You know, I couldn't predict Amazon coming. I can't see the future, even though I like work and thinking about the future all the time. The thing that I tend to rely on is what is the historic pattern of what have made most cities successful and thrive. And that's an urban pattern of compact habitation. Now, of course, people want to live out in nature. It's like, I mean, we get this, and trust me, we get this in spades here in Asheville, where people move out of Florida, they move up here and they go out into our beautiful mountains and destroy them. And they're like, well, I've got a Prius. And I'm like, you're killing the planet, man. Like, I don't care if you're driving a Prius, you're driving 40 miles to get to work every day. And that no one should be living on that mountain out there. Live in the land that we've already destroyed, you know? And so this is a thing that we need to think about, how cities are going to be pushing us in that direction, mostly through climate change. Y'all are going to be impacted by climate refugees, people coming out of the Southwest, heading up your way. So getting that pattern down is going to be critical. And I think that what you'll find is those walkable environments, being able to walk to get a coffee, go to a neighborhood bar, all of that stuff that you find in old patterns of living is going to be the way that we live into the future. Those patterns don't change. When you look at the whole history of civilization for tens of thousands of years, Damascus, 10,000 years old, it's got a pattern of urbanism that looks just like Rome. It looks just like old Beijing. It looks like just like parts of Seattle. You know, there's a pattern of the way that we build things, of urbanism, that really is kind of predictable. It's just the auto and the auto industry and that technology of selling that car comes with so much other stuff that have to be subsidized to make that float. And that's an industry where people have made a tremendous amount of money. We've been promised great gifts with cars. It hasn't delivered. You know, there's nice, I can go out and mountain bike, take my bike further out into the woods if I wanted to with my car. That's awesome. But the scale of damage that is done to cities is immense. And we're going to see that transition. You're seeing scooters and all sorts of new technologies of getting around that's going to increase our walk distance without increasing the need to take our car with us everywhere. And we need to get better bicycle infrastructure so there's more mobility parity in that transportation option. So people aren't taking their life into their hands just getting on a bicycle. But I don't know how your DOT is up by you. This is a fight that are currently happening in the trade. Actually, Chuck's writing a second book coming out in September, specifically about the engineering industry and how they've got it all wrong. He's actually calling them out for making dangerous environments for people and then being irresponsible and saying it's not their practice that's had happened. There was a girl that got killed in Springfield, Massachusetts. I don't know if you all ever saw the article. And the town engineer was like, well, she didn't use the crosswalk. It's like, well, the crosswalk was like a quarter mile away from the door of the school. She's not going to walk that way. She's going to walk the straightest path home. And you designed a street where cars go 60 miles an hour, and it doesn't matter that you're posting it for 35. The design of the street was so wide that people drive in tune to their environment. So if it's sending you signals to go fast, you'll do it. I don't know if that answered your question. That was a long answer, but I think
well,
I wouldn't bother.
You answered a lot of questions.
I wouldn't worry about it. You know, it's just think about moving forward and you don't have to predict the future that deeply.
Great. Well, you have given us a lot of things to consider, Joe. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts, and thank you very much. And Lori and Debbie, anything you want to share before we adjourn?
I would like to say thank you to Joe. Thank you so much. This has been very informative. I would ask, I know we weren't taking audience questions, but my boss is in the audience, the city manager, and I was wondering if you would be willing to have him be promoted as a panelist, introduce himself to you, and I'm sure he might have a question, but I know I would really like to introduce him. We also have several council members, but if we could just kind of take you 2 more minutes. If
I'm here, you got me. I'm just, you know, it's not a big deal for me.
So if I could
manager is not important anyway, but maybe let the counselors in. Just kidding. Yeah, whatever you want.
So Reese, if you wouldn't mind promoting Rob, thank you.
Rob's been promoted.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Joe, thanks so much for coming tonight. I'm a big fan and also a Strong Towns fan. And we had Chuck come and talk to Kenmore a couple of years ago, right at our city hall. So it was really fun. You sort of answered my question, but maybe you could elaborate on some more. So we have really tried to set the table for downtown development. We call it our bullseye of our downtown. And the city even took matters into its own hands and bought up 10 acres of underperforming downtown land. And we got what we dreamt. We wanted just tons of higher density mixed use, and we were able to kind of be the master developer and bring in the development community, and they tore down the low performing stuff and brought in some high value multi-story buildings. And so it was great. It did what we wanted, but we were also hoping that it would be a catalyst for the rest of the downtown, because it was only like a block or two that, you know, that 10 acres was only a block or two. But the catalyst effect did not work. We still have just some underperforming land that's just still sitting fallow. For those of you who know downtown Kenmore, right across the street from the backside of Safeway, there's 1 acre of land that's just a vacant weed lot. And we can't get that property owner to budge. We've met with her multiple times, and we've like, hey, if you develop this land, you could make a lot of money. Or, you know, what if you sold it? You'd do great. And she said, I don't know where I'd put my money if I sold it. I'd just rather pay property taxes on this weed lot than do something. I'm not really a developer, so can't convince her to do a thing. And just one more thing. So you mentioned, oh, we'll tax it more, but that you'd have to change state law to do that. So what can we do to spur those underperforming lots?
Not necessarily. What you could do is a transportation utility fee. You just change the structure of what you're charging. You're allowed to use fee structures. So you can do a stormwater fee. You can actually do it's called a transportation utility fee. Mm-hmm. Think of the roads like pipes, you know, and you're doing an audit of how much pipe surface areas go into the different areas, and just pull that out of your general fund and charge it as a fee structure. You know, you're not changing your tax system. You're just reallocating how you're running your financial system. The other thing is like, okay, if she's giving you, so one is if you put carrots out there, sticks are the next thing to go after. Is what are the sticks that would change the economic calculus for her? Because right now she's telling you that it's not that big a deal to pay what she's paying. But not to be punitive. Part of this is like, okay, well, she's a human. She's telling you she doesn't want to be a developer. Find a developer that she can work with, you know, and she could be a cooperative, think of it as a corporate investor where she's folding her money in. Find somebody that's good in town with financial modeling or they could talk to her at a financial level, so that she's in a net position of making revenue off her property, but it's not scary for her. You know, it's like she doesn't want to go through the brain damage of doing a real estate exchange and moving her money somewhere else. So find somebody that's in the community that's an agile developer that would work with her as a partner. But she's also got to be cooperative in that. And there's lots of small developers that would work with someone like that, particularly in the Northwest. And that's the thing. It's like, just bring her to the table with some people, and if she's willing. Now, the hard part is we've got people in our community that our real estate development company that I used to work with, we used to go and talk with them, and it's just like, man, you're just like, what planet are you on? You know, it's like you talk with them and they're like, it's worth $10 million. And we're like, you realize you can't cash flow that. But there was nothing getting them off their property. If you reach that dead end, go to some other property. You know, it's just going to be something you'll have to just live past. You've got plenty of real estate that needs to turn over around those used car lots and everything else. And just think of these as catalytic projects that are happening around. You can grow your core out, or you can grow catalytically around it, and eventually the holes will fill in between it. You basically have a lot of growth that happened at the wrong time, and you're playing catch up at this point.
Okay, thanks.
It would be cool to see like the 3D model of what you used to look like, and then what happened with your development when it grew up. And that would be actually, let me see if I've got one in here. Presentations everywhere. Yeah, actually, let me show you something. So y'all see my screen, Leander?
Yeah.
So this is a 100-acre new urbanist kind of development by this train line that ran out of Austin. Leander's not the most progressive place on the planet. These people hate Austin, even though they all work in Austin. It's Texas. But this developer was doing this 115-acre mixed-use development, and the city was going to do $20 million worth of TIF. So this is the development, and they were doing the TIF because these are expensive projects to carry until they can get buildings built. So the thing about new urbanist projects or the downtown stuff, and you know this, you've done it, that infrastructure is really expensive in the beginning, but once you start cash flowing it, it's cash flowing at a much higher level than typical suburban stuff. So this is phase one. There's the main street that goes in with the plaza, and then it thickens out around the edges, and then it builds out around with townhouses closer to the train station. So here's their community. They basically incorporated in 1976. It's very suburban. They never had a downtown. This is downtown phase one, phase two, and phase three. So we showed this to the community because they had no idea what a downtown looked like. And I said, look, y'all, you're not like your cousins of Georgetown and Round Rock who were like built in the 1800s. And you could see their downtowns in their model here and here. And they, sprawled out, but you all just are the sprawl with no downtown. But you're going to be adding one right here. And it's like, bam, which is kind of crazy. So that grows their value from 275,000 to $500,000 per acre citywide. And I said, you still have all of this land to grow into if you want to do it. But this is basically adding a different animal. Now, 2 of the city councilors are running around saying this is just a straight up giveaway. And I'm like, well, that's not entirely accurate. This is what the taxes look like as a TIF. So they're basically foregoing this light blue triangle, which is a gift to the developer, but the developer's paying half the taxes through to the end of the tax increment, which is 2031. And then everybody rides that wave into the future. So you're basically investing in something to get bigger as a leverage point. So we filled up the model halfway in 2025 to show them that even a half full thermometer crushes everything else around it. And then they build into the downtown on the right. 2 of the city councilors were dead against this project. They just wanted a Costco and a Target. And I was like, all right, fine, we'll do that for you. So here's your downtown model of a $700 million downtown. And here's your Costco Target if you just do that. So that's the reality of that model. So you could have a $60 million project or a $700 million. Do you want 60 or do you want to invest 20 and get 700? I would say you would invest the 20. In defense of the counselors and in defense of all the counselors here, I mean, think about what a situation it is when you win a popularity contest, you win an election, and the next thing you know, you're on the board of directors for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Like, that's not a fair position to be in. And then somebody's dumping like white papers on you and all of these charts and everything. It's like, we just made this simple. It's like, which would you rather have? And one of the counselors came down to me during the break, and she goes, I want to thank you for making it easy. That when I saw the big purple thing next to the green thing, I want the purple thing. I was like, all right, if that works for you. It's just like, people have a lot of things on their plate. They have their day jobs, kids at home. somebody's complaining to them about they need to solve problems of a dog in a neighborhood. I mean, you know the problems of a counselor. It's not fair. And so how do you make it easy for them to see the path that's ahead? But I would do the same thing looking backward for you all, of what did you look like before you did the project and how much wealth did it perk up in your community? I think that would be helpful for your citizens.
Yeah, and so you're a fan of tax increment financing?
Not necessarily. It's an option. I think that's one of the tools. Obviously it's like I mentioned, Henry George is an option I'm in favor of. I'm just mostly in favor of visualizing the math and understanding what's happening, mostly figuring out where you're bleeding your revenue all over the place. I'm more of a fan of the ROI model, and just having, you should be able to afford your city without adding another person to it. You should be able to run your cash flow of your city in a static state. So think of yourself in a recession. I started doing this stuff in the middle of the recession because I worked in real estate development, and guess what? We weren't doing anything. So I was basically marginally employed, and I went to a planning conference and I was like, y'all need to do this math stuff. And the planners were like, can we just hire you to do that? And that's kind of how I got started. It was looking at the recession. It's not like I laid awake when I was 9 years old thinking someday I'm going to be a tax expert. Like, this wasn't my path. It just kind of happened. But, in a recession, that's when we should have all had the wake up call that we can't afford our communities. When all of a sudden they like start scrambling you out to go find pennies, and you're like, look, we've got no retail sales. There's nothing in the, sorry, the same at the beginning of the pandemic. It's like, we should be able to afford our cities without any new introductions of capital. It should be net neutral at a financial model. And that's where you start. So that's where I would start. Put yourself in a non-growth state and just say, can we afford it? And your answer is going to be no. So and you have to be honest with the citizens, there's, and trust me, I've been in plenty of public meetings where people are like, well, I want a house. And I'm like, that's great. It just realize somebody else is paying for it, and here's the numbers. And they can argue with me all day until they're blue in the face, but bring me some numbers. And this is what we're up against. Actually, this is another good book. Y'all know this book, Misbehaving? Everybody read this book. This guy won a Nobel Prize in economics, and he doesn't believe in economics. And he's an economics professor at University of Chicago. But you can see how much I've noted this one. We are hairless apes, and we have really weird programming in here, and none of it is rational. We can believe we're rational all day long, but psychologists have figured out that we're not. There's another good book that goes with that one called Predictably Irrational by Daniel Earley. But talk to a behaviorist. I mean, they'll tell you, we make the wrong choices. And it feels good to have a big yard and all this other stuff that somebody else is paying for. But somebody's paying for it.
Great. Well, thanks, Joe. Anybody else have any questions? Sounds like he's up for one more, perhaps. If anybody has a burning question they want to ask.
I've taken a deep nerd into the psychology now, so I'm in for a penny and for a pound. You got me.
Well, yeah, and you've given us a lot of things to think about, and we really appreciate your time, Joe, and thanks very much. So, Lori and Debbie, anything more from you two?
There was a hand.
There was a hand. Dennis, go ahead.
A simple question maybe for Lori or Debbie, but Joe has given us a lot of resources, and I want to make sure that we've captured that information so we can, those of us who want to look further into it can do that.
Dennis, the meeting is being recorded, so it will be available to view again. So all the information that Joe presented, you'll be able to view as many times as you like.
I was trying to avoid having to watch it over again just to get the name of a book.
I could send you a list of the books because they're not far from me. It's like it's all within reaching distance. So
that will be fine. Send it to Debbie and she'll distribute it as appropriate.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much again, Joe, and really appreciate your time. And I guess with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.